Hey, what's up guys? My name is James Diamond and welcome back to the next episode of How to Make Uplifting Trance here on Sonic Academy. In the last few episodes we were looking at producing and creating the kick, bass and sub, and then how to process them on the kick and bass bus using some nice kind of compression and EQ techniques. Next up in my tracks I'd usually work on the percussion, so that's exactly what we're going to do in this episode today. The percussion for me is pretty important to make sure that you get it sounding perfect. In particular regards to the open hi-hat, the closed hi-hats, any other kind of top-end percussion, making sure that they're as clean as possible, as really this is what helps drive the track along. So you've got your kick and your bass and your sub for the low end, then you need to have your high-end percussion to help the drive at that kind of frequency spectrum. I hear a lot of tracks that might have an amazing kind of drive in the low and amazing melodies, sounds really good, but then the high-end percussion lets it down because it's not clean or it doesn't kind of fit the track properly, it doesn't really gel with everything else. So today I'm going to show you exactly how I go about mixing down my percussion to make sure you get that nice top end drive, and a couple of cool little techniques that I'd use just to kind of spice things up in the mid-range percussion. So I've got all of my percussions preloaded here just to save time, and I've linked them all to their individual channels, and I've got some of the effects preloaded. Of course they've set at default so we can go through and see exactly what needs to be done. I've also got them all linked to the percussion bus, which you can see here. We've got them all delinked from the master channel and then linked to the percussion bus. So this is just auxiliary bus kind of setup. On the auxiliary bus, I've got three plugins, which are usually my standard ones. I've got the Mag EQ4, just a normal Fruity filter, and the Parametric EQ2. I'm using the Mag EQ4 the same way as what I did on the master channel. I'm using it just to bring a little bit more kind of clean high end, a nice kind of high shelf onto the percussion. And what I'm going to do is use the airband again, set at 40, so default was on off. We're going to set it to 40, and then I'm going to bring the air gain all the way up to 6.5. This is one of my little kind of secret techniques that I use just to really help give the high end of the percussion a little extra clean boost. The filter is just simply a low pass filter so I can control the percussion within the mix. And then I've got a last EQ here, which I'm just going to change to a high cut. And it's going to be around 18,000 Hertz. Just rolling off some of those super high frequencies. Obviously we're boosting them with the Mag EQ4, but as explained earlier on in other videos, that the Mag EQ4 has a very smooth way of using its high shelf, and it doesn't make things sound too brittle, but we just want to make sure that if there is just that little bit too much kind of brittleness at the top, that we're going to take that off with the high cut. Very minimal amount. So first up, let's have a look at our open hi-hat. And as the open hi-hat is always on the offbeat. And let's just have a quick listen to this. Pretty standard, very nice hat. So let's get down and look how we're going to EQ this. First of all, what I always do with my hats is that I'm going to take off the low end. It's pretty much a given. And I'll just play it, and I don't want to take too much off because I still want some kind of that mid-high kind of frequency spectrum in there. I don't want to kind of cut it off too much, so I'll just sweep this till I find the nice area. So that sounds about right. As you can see, it was around 4,500 Hertz kind of zone. That was where it had that nice kind of mid-range. So I'm going to leave it like that for the time being, and we're going to go back and of course use the Mag EQ4 again. And we're not going to use the airband this time, but instead of using the parametric EQ and doing a kind of boost on there, as explained, the high-end boosts on the Mag EQ4 is very subtle and has a very clean way of boosting. I always find that boosting within the parametric EQ, it can be a little bit harsh if you're boosting by quite a lot. So we're going to be using the EQ4 to boost it instead. So it sounds quite nice like that. I'll just flick it on and off. It's got a really nice sound already, and I'll just flick off the Mag EQ4 on the percussion bus so you can hear how that's affecting the open hi-hat also. So it's just giving it that really nice clean high ends that we're looking for. Now I want to make sure that this is at the exact same level as the kick and the bass. In order to do that, we're going to open up the span, just reorganize these, and what I'm looking for is the open hi-hat to be around the same level as the kick. So I'll just play this on mute. We can turn this back to default now. So we can see here that the kick is kind of peaking at around -32.5. There may be a little bit of sub kind of pushing it up a little bit. So we want the open hi-hat to be around the same level as that horizontal line you can see. So sometimes you don't even need to use your ears. You can actually just use this frequency analyzer to kind of push the volume up. Let's just insert the MIDI clip. This is the great thing about using a frequency analyzer. You don't even have to listen, use your own ears. But obviously, in the end of the day, you still do need to use your own ears. So that looks about right. Let's just have a listen. That's sounding pretty good to me. Sounding very nice and level with the low end. We might come back to just kind of having a look at the open hi-hat, as I do frequently go back and kind of change around my levels of my hats, especially the open hi-hat and the closed hi-hats, just to make sure that they're sitting perfectly. Next up, let's go to the closed hi-hats. We've got our closed hi-hat 1. We're just going to do full 16th notes, and then we're going to go into the MIDI, and we're going to change it so that the first 2 are slightly lower on the velocity, and the 3rd and the 4th 16ths are at full volume. Link it to the mix channel, and let's add some EQ. Quite a lot of high end on this close hi-hat already, so I'm not going to use the Mag EQ4 to kind of push it a little bit more, as it just needs a tiny little shelf. It's quite a long sample, there's quite a bit of a tail on it, so I'm just going to go into the instrument properties in the sampler, and I'm going to bring down the hold to make it very nice and short and snappy. That sounded pretty nice, and I think what we're going to do now is add on the LFO tool just to give it a little bit more groove. This is just the default preset, which is the sidechain or the ducking technique. Just helps it gel with the open hi-hat a little bit better. Let's just have a listen and see how it sounds with the rest of the track. That's sounding quite nice. And as you can see, we've got the open hi-hat pans very slightly to the left, and we're going to do the same with the closed hi-hat, but we're going to pan it to the right. It's a nice way of just kind of separating out your open hi-hat and your closed hi-hat, one to the left, one to the right, or vice versa, just so they're not completely down the middle and they've got a little bit more presence by themselves. So we're going to go and do our second closed hi-hat, and I'm just going to copy the MIDI from the first one, put it into the second closed hi-hat. And let's have a listen to what this sounds like. Not a very nice sound, it's actually more of an open hi-hat, but we're going to do exactly the same as what we did with the first closed one. We're going to go to the volume instrument properties, and we're going to pull back on the hold to make sure it's nice and short and snappy. Sound quite nice. Let's add some EQ. Quite a lot of low end in this one, or at least kind of like mid-high, so let's kind of cut a lot of this out. For my second close hi-hat, I'm really looking for quite a high-end type one. And there's something that I like to do with my second close hi-hat is to kind of separate it out. So we've got the first closed hi-hat going to the right, the open hi-hat to the left. I want to send the second closed hi-hat out to the far left and the far right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stereo shaper from FL Studio. This is just a kind of a delay kind of plugin that delays the sound by a certain amount of milliseconds from the left to the right to give that kind of appearance of the sound that it's being pushed out to the far left and the far right. I'm going to use the delay here, and I always find that 17.1 milliseconds to the right or to the left works fine. So I'm just looking in the top left hand corner underneath where it says file. You can see it says 17.1 milliseconds to the right. If we have a listen to this now, we can hear it's been pushed out to the far left and right. We're going to do exactly the same as what we did with the first close hi-hat. We're going to add some sidechain just to give it a bit more of a groove. Sounding nice. Now let's EQ that or level that in with the kick and the other parts of the percussion. Sounding pretty nice. Like the way that they sit with each other, but maybe they're a tad too loud. So I'm going to come back to the span and just readjust the levels of these. I'm liking the way that they're sitting now. They sound a lot more natural. They've kind of got the way that they kind of merge into each other. So you can actually kind of hear that they're creating a groove in itself. They're not disconnected like I hear in a lot of people's music, like I was mentioning before, that sometimes it almost just sounds like you've just got an open hi-hat and a completely disconnected closed hi-hat that isn't really kind of adding to the groove. These three, they almost all sound like it's an actual real drummer on his hi-hat, using his foot to close the hi-hat and then opening it again for the open sound. And they create that nice groove. Next up is the claps. So I've got 2 claps loaded here. Let's just have a quick listen to these. Pretty standard kind of claps. I really like this one here. It's a little bit longer. It's got that nice kind of tail on it. I like to use those slightly longer claps in uplifting trance, as it kind of fills the gap a little bit more and kind of makes it sound a little bit more kind of interesting in the midsection rather than having a real short kind of clap. So I think I'm going to use this second one as the kind of louder of the 2 claps, and then I'm just going to probably pull up on the volume of clap 1 to kind of merge that in. That sounds quite nice. I really like this first clap because it's got quite a nice attack on it. So we're kind of using this for the attack. And then we're using the second clap for the kind of tail. Sounding pretty nice. Next up, I'm going to add some compression. I really want to make this kind of snap through the mix. And we're going to be using the SSL compressor. I absolutely love this compressor for percussion. It's got a great attack on it. You can use it on kicks, you can use it on percussion hits, you can use it on all sorts of different things. It works best when it's kind of small kind of hits that don't last for very long. You can really add a hell of a lot of snap on it. So we're going to change the attack to 10 milliseconds to begin with. We're going to have a nice short release at 0.1 seconds to make sure the compressor stops compressing by the time that the next clap hits. I'm going to keep the ratio at 4:1. And then I'm going to start bringing back on the threshold and see how it sounds. So that's starting to sound really nice. As you can hear as I was flicking the power on and off, that when it's on, it really kind of helps the attack of the clap come through a lot more. With it turned off, it kind of sounded a little bit just standard, nothing too great. And at the same time, turning it on adds the attack and is also gelling the two sounds together. So let's just have a listen to see how that sounds like in the mix. I'm really liking the sound of that at the moment. Changed the attack to 3 milliseconds. I felt that just gave it a little bit more attack on it. Obviously, I am compressing a hell of a lot. You know, it was almost flickering up to 8 dB there. That's fine. You know, you can get away with a lot of compression on it as it's a very short sound. And really, we're kind of just using it to add the attack to the claps and then just gel them both together. Next up, let's add our EQ. And same with the open hi-hat, I'm literally just going to cut off the bottom end. Sounding nice. And now let's add our mag EQ. And we're going to do exactly what we did with the open hi-hat. We're going to use this as the kind of high shelf. I don't want to kind of boost it like this on the EQ2 because I find that, again, it's just a little bit kind of harsh and brittle. So we're going to use the mag EQ4. We're going to set it at 10 kilohertz, and then we're going to start moving up the air bands to see how it sounds and get it kind of perfect. I think that's sounding really nice. It's got a very nice clean high end to it. Like I say, it's not brittle at all. Next up, we're just going to add some reverb. We're adding the reverb to the clap just to kind of help the tail that little bit more and help it kind of gel with the rest of the track. So what we're going to do, we want to pull the low cut up as we don't really want any low end into the clap. And I'm going to play around with the settings, probably a short decay, and then have a look at the pre-delay as I'm pulling that up, and I'll mess around with some of the other ones just to kind of brighten up the clap and give it a bit more body. So that's sounding quite nice. Added a little bit of kind of high ends to the reverb there, and then took off a lot of the low ends. The pre-delay is something that is quite important when you're using your claps. It's the way the pre-delay works is that it delays the reverb by 94 milliseconds or whatever you've got set here before the reverb actually kind of kicks in. So what we're looking for here is that we want to allow the kind of transient and the first kind of initial part of the clap to be triggered, and then we want the delay, the reverb to kind of play after that. So if I just pull this up and down in the mix, and then you can hear what I'm talking about. So you can hear that it's actually adding an extra kind of tail to the clap. So when it was down at 0, it was kind of finishing almost at the same time the clap was finishing. We're actually extending the tail of the clap. So if you do have a very short clap and you want to make it sound a little bit longer, you can use the pre-delay on the reverb to kind of increase that tail. So let's kind of get this into our mix now. Sounding pretty nice. Just a little extra kind of nudge on the mid section here, just to help that kind of pull through a little bit more. So that's our clap. A couple of cool techniques there, using compression to really kind of create the snap, and then the mag EQ4 to really kind of help that high end kind of push through. Next up is our loops. I've got these preloaded as well. These are just kind of very standard loops. So have a listen to this one. As I'm sure you know, that you probably would have seen this 100 times, how to EQ a loop. I'm using the high end of the percussion of the closed hi-hats and the open hi-hat to have the groove. I don't want to have any of this high end in there. I don't want to use that high end area, so I'm sure you've seen this a million times. You're literally going to chop the top and the bottom off. And then an extra cut on the top ends, just to make sure that we've got none of that high end there. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to remove that clap. That's something I see quite a lot. People leave these claps in there. You don't need the clap there on a loop, because what's the point when you've already got the main clap that you're using that we've just kind of EQ'd. So we've got that in the mix. Now let's just get the volume correct. Somewhere about there sounds right, but we're going to go one step further, and you might not have seen this before, but I sometimes like adding some delay to my loops. It's a kind of cool technique that I like to use just to kind of increase the kind of tempo, the energy of the loop. At the moment it's kind of very standard, not much going on, so let's add a little bit of delay. So just going to turn that on. I usually leave it at normal, as I don't want the delay to kind of ping pong left and right, and all I'm going to do is just pull back on the volume. So now we can hear that's added quite a nice little groove to it. The tail of it kind of tailed on for a little bit long there, so I'm just going to pull the feedback level down a little bit so that when the kind of loop stops, it stops the delay pretty quickly. That's a little bit better. Let's have a listen in the mix. That's sounding a little bit better, not so standard now after adding that delay. So now we've got the second loop. Let's chuck that in there. And let's have a listen to this one. Pretty nice, very standard. Once again, we're just going to add our low and our high cuts. There's not too much high end on this one in terms of the kind of closed, like, well, the kind of high end percussion sounds. So maybe we can leave a little bit on. I'm just going to boost that mid range. Sounding pretty nice. And now let's add some sidechain compression or some ducking into it. That's sounding about right. Next up is our loop 3. Let's chuck that in and have a listen to this one. Pretty standard loop once again. Let's just get rid of the highs. And maybe let's go in and try and do something a little bit different with the MIDI. I think that sounds quite nice, just kind of changing up the loop a little bit. Obviously, you don't need to keep exactly how the loop was as standard. It's nice to kind of go in and change things around. So let's get that in with the rest of the track. Sounded quite nice. We'll come back and get all the levels perfect in a bit. For the time being, let's just get our sounds in there. So we're going to create our own kind of little loop here. So I've got a couple of percussion hits. And I'm going to kind of add those in. I'm going to do this manually and kind of try and create a little loop. They're all connected to the same channel, which is channel mixer channel 20, or at least they should be. It doesn't look like they are. Let's change these to 20. I want them all on the same channel. And let's just see how this sounds. I think that could be quite cool. Let's just have a listen with the percussion and drop this in there to see how that sounds. That sounds quite nice. Maybe let's do a little bit of panning on them. Let's maybe pull the first one to the left. Second one to the right. That sounds quite nice. Just kind of separating them out a little bit, giving a bit more stereo spread. And let's add some EQ. Sounds quite good. And once again, we're going to use this kind of delay little technique just to kind of speed up the loop just that little bit more. That just kind of helps it gel with the rest of the track. Now let's just add a tiny bit of reverb just to kind of space it out a little bit more. Just a very small amount of reverb, very, very short, 0.6 seconds decay on there, just to kind of give it a little bit more space. Liking the sound of that so far. As you can see, we've only got 3 loops and a couple of percussion hits, yet it's sounding like it's a full kind of percussion range for your track. So really, you don't have to be adding lots and lots of different loops. You can just use a very few amount and kind of create something very nice out of it. So let's just go back and get these kind of mixed in with the rest of the track. I think that's sounding pretty nice as it is at the moment. Obviously, with the percussion, they don't need to be kind of as loud as, say, maybe your bass lines or other sounds in the mix, because they're only going to be there just to kind of help that mids kind of space sound a bit full and add to the energy of the track. If you to take them away, then you're going to hear that there's something clearly missing in that section. So it's really just there to kind of help, like I say, fill the energy and the space in that part. Unless you've got a very specific kind of percussion hit you want to kind of push through in the mix to make it really clean and loud, then yep, absolutely go for it. But for the time being, these are just kind of helping to lay the foundations of the track. So finally, let's add our ride cymbal. And it's connected up to the ride channel here. Pretty standard ride, sounded quite nice. Let's add some EQ. I don't want to cut too much off the low end because like we did with the open hi-hat, I still want it to have some of that kind of mid-high range in there. So that sounded quite nice. Don't want it to sound too brittle once again by pushing too much on the high end. Let's get that mixed in with the track. It sounded quite nice, but it doesn't really fit with the track that well, to be honest. It kind of sounds like it's not really merging with the rest of the high-end percussion. So there's a couple of ways that you can go about kind of helping this kind of sit better. One thing that I really like to do is add some sidechain onto it. So I'll just pop on the LFO tool and we'll have a listen now. I think that's loaded. Let's try again. So it's sounding a bit better. You can hear it kind of has a bit more groove and a bit more pump to it. But then we can go one step further. We can then again add this kind of delay technique. So we're going to keep it as the normal, and we're going to pull back on the volume here just to make sure that it's not too much in the mix. You can hear that's kind of adding its own groove to the ride cymbal there. So I'm quite liking the way that that sounds now. Everything's sitting pretty tight together. So just to recap, obviously the main thing that I'm looking for is when the track's playing at the low end and the high end of the percussion are sitting kind of pretty much exactly at the same level. This is how you're really going to kind of get a much better balance between the entire track. And the beauty of having it and mixing it down this way is now that we've got these two levels exactly the same, everything else should just perfectly fit exactly into the center there. It's something that you can use, obviously, this Voxengo span to kind of get sounding perfect. It won't always be 100% correct, so you will need to use your ears. And obviously using some high quality speakers, some monitors is going to be a big help for this. Using headphones can be good, but you can get a little bit kind of confused sometimes because some headphones won't be as a flat kind of frequency response unless you've got some very, very expensive high-end quality studio headphones. I'd recommend using your monitors, as it will kind of give you a better sound, especially with the stereo spread as well. So that's pretty much it for this episode. We've got everything down, looking at a couple of different techniques, using a mag EQ to kind of push the high ends instead of using a normal kind of EQ, as the mag EQ has got this very, very smooth high shelf that we like to use. And then using the stereo shaper to kind of push the closed hi-hats to left and right to give a nice kind of stereo spread. We don't want all of our percussion directly down the center. We want to kind of push it out to the different sides and play around with the stereo spread there. A heavy compression on the clap. I think it was about 8 decibels. Yeah, almost hitting the 8 decibel mark, and that was really just helping the attack of the clap come through and gelling those two claps together, as well as adding a little bit of reverb, using the pre-delay to kind of separate the reverb from the start so it adds an extra long tail to the clap. And then, like we were saying, adding some delay to the loops just to kind of give them a little bit more groove and make them a bit more interesting, and then creating our own kind of groove ourselves by using individual percussion hits. That's it for this episode, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.